exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Oh, wow. I'm in a dream world here where nothing is the way that it should be. It's all mystical and occult and paranormal. And Tim Swartz is the co-host, along with myself, Tim Beckley. And how are you tonight, Tim, there in Indiana?
I'm fine, Tim, and you promised you weren't going to talk about politics, and here you are, just right off the top, talking about politics.
I mentioned politics?
Well, you're talking about strange and weird things. You know.
Oh, well, no, that's true. Yes. And we certainly have had that now for, too long of a time. And I enjoyed the World Series last night. And, of course, I'm neither from Cleveland or Chicago. But those boys put on a great game. I thought it was just absolutely fabulous. And I was rooted to my seat there watching in front of my big 56-inch smart TV screen.
Yeah. What was it? It was like 108 years since something
like that. Yeah. Now, weren't the Chicago weren't they responsible? Weren't they called the Black Sox at one point? Right? I think they were. Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, yeah. Well, no, they were involved in some hanky panky and rigging and. Almost like a political race or something like that, I think. Yeah, but that was way back before the days when I was watching baseball. Of course, I grew up watching the world champion New York Yankees, and boy, has that, I hate to say that, but boy, has that team declined. In fact, I think the odds makers are saying that the Yankees are 25-1 to get in the World Series this year. I mean, they were on the bottom of the bottom of the list there.
Right.
Nobody takes them too much seriously anymore. But this is not a sports program. This is a program on the strange, the unusual, and hey, Tim, the bizarre, right?
Yes, let's explore some of it, Tim.
Yeah, I think we should. And how are we going to do that this evening, Tim?
Oh, well, I think that we should do it by bringing in two absolutely fantastic guests. We have Paul Eno, who has been on our show several times now, more than several times.
Well, he's a regular. He's like
he really
family.
Is, yeah.
He's family. Just like the Addams family, it's the Eno family.
Yeah, you know what they say, you can't choose your relatives.
There you go.
Yeah, but you can choose to get as far away from them as you possibly can. Well, Paul, great to have you with us, and Tim, Paul, we also have with us, and I guess this guest came as a recommendation from Paul. We have Shane Surway. So, Shane, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing excellent. How y'all doing?
Well, it's great to have you with us.
Well, I think this all started, was it a little bit over a month ago, Paul? You were talking about your recent experiences at this very secret location in Pennsylvania. Yeah. And I insisted upon further information. So you said, well, Sean is the go-to guy on this area. And he's also, of course, well, Shane, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background in the paranormal? I know you've been involved in this for a while, and you take a kind of actually you and Paul both take a very kind of unique approach to PSI or the psychic or the paranormal, whatever you want to identify it as. So, Shane, give us a little bit about your background since you are new to the show.
Yeah, so I've been doing it for about 30 years, and I investigate all things, but my specialty is, these parasitic hauntings, these negative hauntings where people where families are being attacked, and that's my specialty. So I do a lot of those, and been very successful helping people, get relief, and even going after other investigators and demonologists and priests and stuff, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to provide relief to all those families. So that's kind of my thing. But we check out everything, Paul and I. Like we said, we're investigating all kinds of things: UFO, Sasquatch, shadow people, all over the East Coast and up to Pennsylvania.
And why don't you explain to the listeners and to Tim and I as well, what exactly a parasite is? I mean, how is your investigation differ than, say, most ghost hunters?
Yeah, so most of the other investigators, mostly everybody, and even some of the clergy, they go in when there's a negative haunt, and they use, whether it be religion or different tactics, but they're basically using like a paranormal to fight the paranormal, but they ignore the root cause of what initiated the interaction to take place, in what is allowing that haunt. Because almost every single time, I can tell you where homes are really, really active in a negative way, I can tell you that it didn't start off that way. They lived there fine for so long, and then something happened that changed their dynamic, something changed their environment inside their home, and that really, whether it was a vulnerability on their part or something that attracted these parasites in and said, "Hey, I got somebody in a weak state right here. I can mess with them." And then, what they're going to do too is they'll start doing little things because they need you to pay attention to it. So once you have that vulnerability, once they stimulate that attention turns into a session. You can't take it out of your head, and these things just got you. They control everything you do, and so the way I differ is I identify what initiated, what changed in that person's life, what drew this thing, this parasite to the family or to an individual, and I address that issue. I heal those personal issues or the whole family dynamic if I need to, or whatever the case is, and then send them, give them the information that they can't be given attention anymore. They can't give it control. They can't let it dictate their daily routines, and shut it off from their internal dialogue. And we take away all those key factors. We eliminate it, and these parasites take off.
Hmm. Well, that's one of the things that I've observed a number of times. You have a family or a household that is experiencing this kind of phenomena, and they'll call in the priest or the minister. They'll come in and brandish the cross around, throw in some holy water or things like that, and rather than alleviating the problem, it seems to exasperate it.
It usually does, and what happens is, sometimes it will work, and if it works inadvertently, because basically, if the family practice that certain religion that's in their house, if they bring in their priest and they practice that religion for the right reasons, for love and positivity, and that presence or that root, that tactic that the priests use, if that centers them to be less fearful of the entity, makes them feel more confident, and makes them feel more love in their home and more, that type of stuff, then that's why it works. But most of the time, I can tell you 100%, most of the time that it'll sometimes it makes it better for a little while, but when it comes back worse than ever. Than ever.
I wanted to ask Paul, when you started out as a, well, of course, I guess, most of our listeners, if they've heard you before, realize that you were studying for the seminary, correct? And
yes,
yeah, and somehow you got waylaid into the paranormal. And what was the incident exactly that got you out of the seminary and into the bizarre and strange and
well, it was
unexplained?
Well, that resulted from more or less being waylaid by the seminary, and it was, I had been involved with a number of things for years, and in the 70s, I was involved with Ed and Lorraine Warren, doing some work with them, and I did graduate from 2 seminaries, but the third one, the one from which I would have been ordained, said, keep your nose in your books. You shouldn't be doing this. And even though I was working with some of the best names in the field of exorcism particularly, they just didn't like that. There was no one, actually, there was no one particular incident. It just, there was one student, as a matter of fact, I guess this might have been the incident, but it never occurred. One particular student, and there was some politics behind this, accused me in 1976 of performing an exorcism on him, which is completely ridiculous. The rector of the seminary had come back from Paris, was exhausted, went to the faculty meeting, and that's the first thing he heard. So off with his head. They didn't want to talk to me. I got a letter. However, I did meet with the rector after that, and he said, I realized, I had a lousy day, and I realized this is a stupid story. You want to come back and study, right? I said, yes, but I was never invited back. It was very strange. So, but anyway, I have been able to use that education. You can always use an education of any kind in future, particularly philosophy and things of this kind. So that's essentially what happened there. But that was, as of 1977, I was out on my ear and didn't know what else to do except write, because that's the only other thing I could do. And I ended up bumbling into a career in journalism.
Well, now how did you get involved with Ed and Lorraine Warren?
Well, I was had written something about that first case. I'm sure we've discussed it in Pomfret, Connecticut, in the early 70s, where there were all sorts of the sounds of daily life in this abandoned village, and we were seeing all these things and hearing all these things and having all these experiences, we being a group of seminary students and a photo expert and myself. And I'd written about that, and my theory was, because I was beginning this theological education, that maybe these entities that we think of as ghosts are actually souls in purgatory. Believe it or not, that's where I started. So, so I was out to test that in this case, and of course I found nothing of the kind. But anyway, Lorraine Warren read what I'd written and was very interested in this, and she called me, and I went down to their house in Monroe, Connecticut. It was about 55, 60 miles from where I lived in the Hartford area, and we became great friends. And she was a terrific cook. And I always enjoyed being invited down there to dinner. And I worked with them on a couple of cases, the most famous one being that Bridgeport poltergeist case, the subject of Bill Hall's book, The World's Most Haunted House. So I worked with them until about 1978. I sort of disagreed with something they were doing. Mm-hmm. And I dared question the gods of paranormal research. So, Ed and I had sort of a peace conference at this ice cream shop. And, we parted ostensibly on good terms, but I never heard from them again. And, it was, and I also think that when I was a seminary student, I was very useful. We had a very close relationship. I mean, they were like parents to me. But because I'd been thrown out, I often suspect maybe I wasn't of that much use to them, because they made a living at this, and that, they needed all the credible people to back them up that they could, and they didn't seem to be of any use that way anymore. So I don't know. Maybe I'm being unfair, but so I worked with them from 1972 to 1978. Well,
they certainly have been high profile in the exorcism. I was going to say business, but I use that in quotes, but I guess business too, because now some of their work, of course, has been utilized by the film industry, and a couple of movies have come out based on their research, and also, I guess that does put them out there in front of millions of people, actually, in a very large audience. There's
a hilarious irony, actually, because when The Conjuring came out in 2013, Warner Brothers and Vice, the production company, asked Ben and I to be in a featurette that was going to go with the film.
Yes.
So there we are. It's only 7 minutes long, but it's kind of interesting. There we are. And then all of a sudden, there's Lorraine Warren. And there was they didn't realize that I'd worked with them, and there was no knowledge of the politics involved. But Lorraine, who I always loved very much, must have keeled over when she saw that there was moi in there, after so many years of estrangement. So it just, life is full of ironies and synchronicities that way, as you know, Tim.
It's interesting. You talked about when you first got into it, you were looking into the idea that these may represent souls in purgatory. I mean, I know that a lot of times that these entities have a tendency to mimic the belief systems of people around them. I mean, did you find anything like that happening? For a while that almost like it was trying to they were trying to confirm what you were looking for.
Well, yes and no, Tim. In this Pomfret, Connecticut Village of Voices case that I just referred to, there were very few signs that we were being noticed at all. It was like these people were just carrying on their daily lives, and this was perhaps the genesis of some of the ideas that we have today about parallel worlds and everything being just as physical, and the spiritual thing kind of not doing the job for explaining this stuff. But then when I got into exorcisms later on at my second seminary, the faculty was very sympathetic, not very, but enough for me not to get in trouble. And I never performed any exorcisms, but I assisted at several at a local state hospital where there were psychiatric patients. And when stuff would start flying off shelves across the room, the doctors realized this was not the patient doing this, and there we were, the priest and myself. And excuse me. And so when those began to occur, I participated in 10 exorcisms, again, just assisting, and it just didn't add up either. It seemed like this was perhaps the wrong approach. As you mentioned, they take a combative approach, expressing the authority of the church over the demons. Okay, so again, mountains of assumptions. These are spirits. These are demons, and they would mimic, I think, the belief systems to a point. There is, when you hear the stuff about they want to get the name of the demon, that's actually true, and they'll get this name. But I got suspicious of that because I'd run into the same name here and there, and the people who were doing the exorcism didn't realize that. I mean, everything was fishy, So I think that they were, to some extent, mimicking the belief systems, being what you expect them to be in order to push your buttons and eat, which is what they do.
Mm-hmm. Lots of button pushing going on there.
Indeed.
Well, now, how did you and Shane first get together?
Oh, that's a story for a novel. I think it was 1998, wasn't it, Shane?
Yeah.
And we were in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, where I live and where Tim has been to our studio and on our show.
Oh, yes.
It was down in the another part of the town from where we lived, kind of down the hill, and the police had been called to this house because of a noise complaint. And it turned out nobody was home, but they would hear the noise coming from the house. They'd go up to the door, knock on the door, everything would stop. And I guess there were several apartments. Somebody was home, but and there was nothing going on. And the police told them to call me. And they didn't know, who you're going to call, So it was a Sunday night, and I just had a shower, and I was settling down with my family to, just have a quiet evening. And the call comes from this fellow, and then we went down. And the case went on over several years, and Shane was contacted separately by the man in the house who was quite ill and more or less homebound. I don't know if I call him elderly because I'm about the same age now as he was then. So in his 60s, we'll say. And all sorts of odd things would be reported. A resident in the neighboring apartment reported a female figure coming out of the wall. Sort of your classic negative, quote unquote, ghost activity. And so I showed up one morning, and there was Shane. I saw this New Hampshire plate sitting across the street. I knew it was him, and we just hit it off immediately. And during the course of the first conversation with the man in the house, we realized that Shane and I had the same theories. And I almost nobody had the same theories that we did at the time. So we were brothers from the start. Shane, if you want to tell them how that unfolded.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, and he's right. We're definitely brothers from the start. But yeah, so I mean, this guy was seeing this disfigured female rising up in the corner of his room. I caught a picture of some disfigured looking thing peeking out from the fan in the same corner. But he'd wake up in the middle of the night or at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, and inches from his face, he'd see this disfigured lady's face inches from his nose. Yeah, and it freaked him out, and so he had all kinds of things happening, and we actually there was another investigator that came in that who fooled me, and it made me think that he was more experienced than what he was, and he was a lot older than I was, but he says, I want to learn from you. You got a great reputation, so I said, sure, come on this case. Well, what he witnessed blew his mind, and that's a whole nother story. But I had some time getting him back to, but anyway, so we had to kind of identify what when this all started, why it started. So questions I like to always ask is how long have you lived here? And he said, my girlfriend has lived here for 11 years. I have lived here for 6 years. I said, how long has it been haunted? Have you had this activity? He said, for the last 2 years. So I asked him, what changed 2 years ago? What changed this environment? What changed your life? What changed, something drastic? He says, well, it was about the time I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And he was put on meds and he couldn't work and all that. And plus he was a Vietnam vet. So here he is sitting at home thinking he's probably going to succumb to this illness. He's thinking about his friends that were blown up in front of him in Vietnam and just all this negativity. And then, so he became vulnerable. He became a target to this stuff. And I believe that it's all frequency. So when these emotions are low substantially like this and we have lower frequency, we can become tuned to these parasites like a two-way radio. So if we change our thinking, change our internal dialogue, we break the frequency, we break the connection. So we asked. So he says, yeah. So I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, this and that. So basically, to simplify it to him, we just said, all right, we're going to purge your home with positive energy. You need to think more positive. You need to do things that make you feel good about yourself. Do you want to, volunteer in a soup kitchen? Just do something. Get out of the house. Just don't sit. So
well, we're coming up on our first break here, Tim, in just a minute, and I know we want to get further into this concept of the parasite as opposed to the spirits of the dead, which of course most paranormal researchers, I guess, consider these EVP, the voices and all, to be generated by. And also, too, we want to go visit that secret location in Pennsylvania, and we want to find out why the tie-in between UFOs, Bigfoot, voices from other planes and dimensions, why this all seems to operate in tandem, usually, or at least in a lot of cases. Don't you find that, Tim, the way it is?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, like everything else, not all the time, but but definitely you'll see them walking hand in hand very often.
So we will be right back with Exploring the Bizarre, and this is Tim Beckley and Tim Schwartz.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Schwartz.
I can feel that tingling sensation in the air, Tim.
It's love. It's love, Tim.
Ah, yes, indeed. And we're here tonight talking about some very strange topics. Exorcism, parasites, UFOs. We're going to get into Bigfoot. We're going to go far afield. But Paul, I think, has some very exciting news for us. I understand, Paul, that your new book has just been released ahead of schedule.
Yes, it was supposed to be released at the end of January, and it hasn't really been released yet, but it is about to be. They moved it 2 months forward, Schiffer Publishing, and so we're kind of scrambling to accommodate some of the events and things of this kind. The book is Behind the Paranormal. Everything you know is wrong. And there are 14 chapters, essentially based on our CBS and WOON radio scripts for the past 9 years, when we did not have guests, and Ben and I just talked about our own cases and other things of interest. So I think it covers a lot of the spectrum. the paranormal, and I have one lonely copy that's come to me, and they sent it with a bottle of wine, which I thought was a really nice touch. And they should be in stores by the end of the month.
Well, Paul, I first heard you when you were on CBS. I had a device, and I think it was part of Pandora. It was just like a Wi-Fi receiver, and you could tune it to like talk radio or music or Latin music or anything that you want, and it would have a list of stations that were already programmed in, and it would repeat your show over and over and over again. So I got into the habit of hearing your show maybe 2 or 3 times because it was on a loop, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, you never told me that. I thought you had a nightmare or something, and that's how you heard it.
No. It was on this Pandora box or whatever they call this thing, and it had I don't know, maybe about 900 talk shows, and it had a small selection of metaphysical or occult programs. It was you and Mary Sutherland, I think, Timothy, Wisconsin.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, okay. So it was your show and her show, and I think maybe a Kevin Smith program that played over and over and over day and night. I don't know how that is, but that's what it was. So and then of course later on you invited me on your show. And how many years has Behind the Paranormal been on now?
Well, between the network and the Boston Providence station, now it's about 9 years, coming up on 9 years. And
you've done what, almost closing in on 300 episodes?
No, actually, it's more like 700.
Oh my goodness!
Because we're on twice a week. Because we were on the Boston Providence station on Mondays and the CBS on Sundays. So there were 2 shows a week. So that really piled up.
And now you've moved to Sunday from Monday, right?
Yeah, so we moved back to Sunday. We had a drive time slot on Monday, and there were a lot of irate commuters in the area who looked forward to the show. But the Sunday slot allows us, as Shane will tell you, to do some on-location broadcasts because the station is fully staffed. But that was not the case on Mondays. So it's been an interesting experience since we switched to the destination slot, as the station manager calls it.
And Ben, your son, is still doing the program with you?
Absolutely, yeah. Although
wonderful.
People heard him grow up on the air. He started at the age of 16, and he was the youngest syndicated broadcaster in the country. And now he's married, and he lives across town, but we still do a lot together, including the show. And he's working with Shane, as a matter of fact, on a case in New Hampshire at this point.
Mm-hmm. Now, Shane, we got to talking with Paul when he was last on the program about this spot. I call it a window area in Pennsylvania, where all sorts of weird things have been going on. I guess there have been sightings of UFOs at pretty low level, and I think Paul had a sighting of some sort of a creature, Bigfoot, just to use a term, I guess, to readily identify. Did you discover this location?
No. William Hall, who was the author of the Haunted House Diaries. Now, he was contacted by the lady on the property who read this book, and she said, "Hey, we got something just like this, just like in that book." And so she reached out to Bill, William Hall, and so we had a plan to all go there together. But William hasn't been able to make it, so it's just been Paul and I at this point. Ben is gonna definitely try to make the next one, and and maybe Bill too, but so Paul and I have been out that way twice now. Once in May, and then again, just a month ago or so, or
the end of September,
yeah. So so it came from a reader of William Hall's book.
Yeah, that's that place is. It's really bizarre. It's almost just like a smorgasbord of unusual activity. I mean, you just take a dartboard with pick your weirdness and throw a dart, and it'll pop up there.
Much like the Litchfield County case in Connecticut that we've been working on as well. To give you an idea of what this is, it's in Western Pennsylvania. Obviously, we can't say where because all circus can break loose. It's a large tract of hilly rural land with forests, fields, and farms. Typical kind of location of that kind. There's the central triangle we've been investigating is about 4 square miles with a central core of about 43 acres. Now that's just so far. Only 2 trips. We spent about Shane, 5-6 days there so far.
Right.
And we'll be going back as soon as we can. Now, the place has a very long history. Before modern times, there's evidence of a Native American settlement and tool making as far back as the 1200s, probably way back before that. Around about the 1500s, apparently, there have been university studies. The fossils have been found, archaeological work has been done, and there seems to have been around about the middle of the 1500s, the 16th century, a significant meteor impact of all things. And there's a hill which is very rounded. It's full of iron fragments, which nobody told me before I went up there, and I have a metal allergy, so that was interesting. Just to give you an example of some of the things that have occurred, there are. Let me just look at the letter that Bill got from the owner of one of the owners of the property. They have, she says, we have spirit activity, UFO craft, and lights that are seen often. Gray aliens have been seen. There is a lot of Bigfoot activity, such as prints, tree knocking, high-pitched noises, and a face-to-face encounter by a well-known, reliable source. That's an investigator. I don't know if he's reliable or not, but I have, because she continues, I have pictures of prints in the snow, and no one can explain. Magnetic energy that drains batteries, makes people lightheaded. A 12-foot by 3-foot portal or doorway was discovered in the family campground on our property. There are incidents of missing time in the campground. Dan was almost knocked off his tractor when he drove into an invisible force in the campground that left a V imprint on his forehead. We saw photographs of that. And that's essentially the thing. And
let me. You say doorway. Are we talking about an actual doorway, or are we just speaking of in general terms?
Well, this is the woman's description of her concept of this. We would say that you have a flap area.
Oh, yeah, window areas. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
window area.
Yeah. I thought maybe there was an actual doorway there because some people.
Well, they say there is, and they say that Bigfoot kind of hangs around there. But again, it would be a multiple world intersect in our terms, and there are many of them, and of course they move. So that's essentially the background. Shane and I first went May 20th to 22nd of this year, and I don't know where to begin. We stationed ourselves, Shane, remember the first night in an upper field above the main house. Now, I should emphasize that there are a number of families and homes involved in this, and this is what we always see in these areas. It's never just one home, and you never look in just one home or one family. There are people all over the place experiencing this, and we actually had a meeting with them in September, which was quite interesting. So anyway, that first night was the night of May 20th, Friday night. We stationed ourselves in the field above the house where the lady who just wrote what I read lives, and it was I stayed there till well past midnight. I'm more of a night owl than Shane is. There were a number of strange lights photographed, including a string of lights that a number of local people have reported close to the ground in several places. Shane, you photographed some daylight objects in the sky. And tell us what happened the next day in broad daylight, albeit was raining in this campground area.
Yeah, so I went down to the campground area, and they have a pavilion. Now, it was pouring rain. So I think that's why what I saw, I didn't hear my truck at an idle, because it was just absolutely pouring. And so it was about around 3 o'clock or a little bit beyond 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I had gone down there. Paul was resting, and I was messing with my equipment. What I was doing when I was waiting. First of all, I was trying to dry off because I was soaking wet, and I was waiting for the rain to let up just a little bit, because I was going to put some trail cams all out in the woods, in some of these hotspot areas where they had sightings over the years. So I'm getting my equipment ready, fumbling around, and something catches my eye at probably my 1 or 2 o'clock. And I look up, and there's this dark figure thing that moved, and from my vantage point, I couldn't tell how tall it was, but I knew it moved really weird, and it was surreal to look at. I'm like, I know I've been in the woods my whole life, and I've seen every animal you can see. This thing moved really bizarre, and I'm trying to figure out what it is. And like I said, the vantage point, I couldn't tell how big it was. So I took note that there was a sign. It was a keep out sign or no trespass sign, and this thing was as tall as the sign. So I said, okay, when I get up there, I can gauge it that way. Well, this thing, I started to put it in a drive. I got my camera ready and fired up. I was going to shoot up there and take some pictures. This thing took off really fast. And when it did, its arms, which actually made it look like three giant things moving at the same time at first, until I got a little closer. As it took off, I could tell there were arms or appendages, moving back and forth. I mean, swinging so high that it actually was swinging above its head, and it was gone. And I tried to cut it off. I went up the road, the little dirt path, and I tried to cut it off, but it was long gone. So, but when I passed the area where I saw it standing, where it took off from, I noticed something further back to my left. It had flushed 3 deer, and those deers were hauling butt, the other way. And this thing was going the opposite direction. So I tried to cut it off, didn't get it. I backed back up to the sign, walked up to the sign, and the sign was easily just a photo of it that Paul took. We went back. The top of the sign was easily 1.5 to 2 foot taller than me. I'm 6 foot tall. So this thing was gigantic. So I mean, I'm not gonna put any claims on what it was. I didn't get to see its face or any facial features. It was a large animal standing at 2 feet. Bears don't run on two legs. I mean, I don't know. So I'm not gonna put any names on what I saw, but I can just tell you what I saw.
Also, bears usually kind of just, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of just usually lumber around. They're not known for, like.
They can run.
Well, they can run. I've been chased by one, so I can testify that they can run.
Yeah, but they usually run on all fours.
Oh, exactly.
How far away were you from it when you first saw it, Shane?
I would say about maybe 100 to 150 feet, maybe. But very clear, it was all open, because now what the family had done over the years is they cleared this area, and they put different sections to where their families could come and camp. They could all camp on this little site together. So they put different spots where different campers could set. And so it was all clear, with just the exception of a few trees in this camp area. But then where this thing was standing, it was on the other side of a thin layer of trees. And I'm talking like a very thin layer, maybe 10 foot wide, with just small, skinnier trees. And it was standing just on the other side of that.
This place sounds almost like an Eastern version of the Skinwalker Ranch.
Well, you haven't heard anything yet. Yeah. So anyway, that was it was, so we kind of limped back home, kind of intrigued here. Well, we went back on September 16th for a couple of days, and we took turns monitoring the areas where and of course we also had visited several homes, and there's one house having trouble with shadow people, things of this kind. And so we kind of started to digest all this and went back on September 16th. Now that was a brilliant moonlit night. It was a Friday, pretty much all over the east. It was a very, very bright moonlit night, a couple of clouds. But I stationed myself up, and now Shane was down in the campground because the family had an RV that they let Shane use one night and me the next. So I'm up in the same field where we gotten some of those strange lights, and I was expecting lights, and I should know after 46 years of doing this, I think I'd know you never get what you expect. So it was a little bit chilly, and I had my truck. Tim, you've been in my truck, and Tim Beckley, that is, and I lowered the driver's side window, but the other window I kept up because I was expecting stuff on the left. Well, it was very much to my shock. Something caught my eye to the right, and of course, again, brilliant moonlight. Plus, your eyes had adjusted. It was like daytime. There was a large, obviously two-legged, brown, furry figure moving up the hill very slowly. And I remember the knees and the huge legs moving up and down, and its head was kind of bowed as it was looking for something in the grass. And we found out the next day this was about 320 feet away at the most. So I didn't know. So I shot a picture with my infrared camera through the cold window of the truck. Obviously, no heat signature. You got to remember, Shane and I are kind of new to this Bigfoot thing, if that's what it was. So I decided I was going to get out. And as soon as I got out of the truck, as quietly as I could, my wife called. I mean, talk about, a monument to ill timing that will stand in the history of the paranormal. And, why didn't you turn off your phone, Paul? Well, duh, I should have. I thought Shane might text me or something. But here's the theme from Lord of the Rings, which is my ringtone, comes blasting out across this field. Naturally, I didn't see this thing again. So shortly after that, maybe 6 minutes later, all these lights come on at the other side of the field, up into these trees. And they look like ordinary flashlights or spotlights, right? So I didn't want to drive over there. I didn't know if there were any yawning crevasses in this field that would swallow my truck. So the next night, now other things were happening. Shane can explain what was going on down in the campground. But the next night we had a neighborhood meeting, something we've been trying to do in the Connecticut case for 5 years. Haven't done it yet. And we had, Shane, we had like 15 to 20 people came to this.
Oh, yeah.
And we made a presentation with PowerPoint and all this stuff, explaining what we thought was going on. Everybody had their stories. And when I related what had happened to me in this field and this sighting, a hand went up, and it was the woman who lived in the house just over the lip of that hill. And she said she and her daughter had driven in, and they heard something big moving through the field. At the same time, I was seeing it. And they got their spotlights. The people around here are so used to everything being weird. They're not afraid of this stuff. They went right up into the field and were shining stuff into the trees and around in the bottoms of the trees, this sort of thing. And the thing had long gone by this time. But presumably that is corroborative witness to whatever it was I was seeing. Mm-hmm. So that was quite interesting. So I don't know, Shane, if you want to, you were down in the campground in the meantime.
Right. So, all right. So I was getting everything together and batteries, make sure everything was set, and I was sitting in the camper, and I noticed lights coming down. I didn't know if it was Paul coming down towards the campsite or not, but I saw lights and I couldn't tell, but it only the direction they were coming from. So I waited, and then I realized it wasn't on the path. It was on the other side of that tree line where I had seen that creature, and there was a truck, and it was orange. It had like a decal on the door. It kind of looked like every state, Department of Transportation truck I've ever seen. Pickup truck, bright orange with a decal on the side. And it was strange. They were spotlighting with a really, one of those really, really bright spotlights. They weren't spotlighting the crop. They had corn in there or whatever. They weren't spotlighting that. They were spotlighting the perimeter of the property, and they were shining their light towards where I was, and it actually hit me right in the face. And this is the most bizarre thing, because they were about 20 to 30 feet away from my best trail cam that was pointed right at them. They spotlighted the camera. They were looking right at the camera as they drove by slowly past my trail cam. In the morning, I had pictures of deer. I had, deer, raccoon, several different images. So the camera was working throughout the night. Their image never showed up. I know this camera well. It's my best one, and I've had it the longest. There's nothing I can think of why they were not captured on this camera. It does not make any sense to me. It blows my mind, actually. So that was the first thing that happened. I had gotten out after about 10 minutes. No, it was about 5 minutes after the light stopped. I thought I saw a light, like they might have parked up in the field a little bit. So I said, I got to check this out. So I started walking up that way and realized it was just, the moonlight or whatever it was. And now I don't use a flashlight. It's pretty dark, because even though there was moonlight, but where I was, the camp there, it's pretty. umbrellaed by trees around the perimeter of the campsite, and so it was pretty dark, and I could still make out some stuff, but I I was walking down towards a path where they have seen what they say a Sasquatch down this little knoll or this little hill, and I heard like a grunt, like a deep, like a bull, like a a real nasally snort directly behind me. I'm telling you true. I turned around expecting to see like a giant horse in back of me or something, or something like that, but there was nothing there.
Hmm.
And then throughout the rest of the night, I kept hearing mumbled talking. You mean while it was outside or when I was in the camper? I heard it all night long. It was like different voices, but they were like, like I couldn't make out no words, but they were. It was some kind of intelligent discussion going on. I didn't understand it. But there
Well,
was
now the two of you, okay, you had this sighting of this. Let's just call it a creature, a cryptid, for a better lack of a better term. Who had I mean, did other witnesses in the area report seeing this creature before you did? I mean, the original people involved in this incident.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, they did. So it wasn't like something that you just noticed. I mean, other people were reporting it as well.
Oh,
Right.
yeah, they've all had the Bigfoot sightings in this area, for lack of a better term, are very prominent as community experiences in the sense that Shay, I haven't talked to anybody over there who hasn't seen Bigfoot or at least a cryptid that's like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right, right.
And
It-
again, at this neighborhood meeting, it all came up. And then when you brought that up at the neighborhood meeting, there were comments that, that's how they talk to each other.
Right, which I never heard that before, so it wasn't like
Neither
something
had
that
I.
I was pulling from somewhere else. I was just, stating what I heard, and I'd never heard that they communicate by like this, I was hearing, and there was a high pitched one, and then there was like a regular, maybe a little, not as deep as my voice, but
Maybe they were married from the way you described the sound.
but I heard all sides of the camper.
This just gets more incredible as you go further into the incident. And I know we're just coming up, Tim, on another break. In fact, I hear the music coming in. And so we'll be back in just a few minutes, continuing our rather strange discussion of this very peculiar area in Pennsylvania where all paranormal hell has broken loose.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to the second hour of Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Tonight we're talking with Paul Eno and Shane Surway. And, Paul, you said something during the last hour about this location that you and Shane have been investigating. You said at some time in the past, apparently a meteorite crashed, and boy, I tell you, that sounds like the beginning of practically every bad science fiction movie I've ever seen. Everything was cool until the meteor crashed, and then all hell broke loose. Yeah.
Very Lovecraftian, also.
Very much so. Yeah.
Well, I hadn't thought of that, but I mean, what it did to me was that I have a metal allergy, and I can't even wear my wedding band, which is just as well because it was eaten by a chicken 30 years ago anyway. That's true.
That has to mean something.
Well, we're still together 35 years. Anyway, hill is very awfully rounded. It struck both of us, and I started to have like these weird feelings in this attack, and my heart started to pound, almost like a panic attack, which that doesn't happen to me. And of course, the theory is that it was all the metal in this hill. But while I was freaking out there, Shane happened to find a track in the grass there, and we're going to be. We're still looking at these pictures, but they'll be posted to at least my website, newenglandghosts.com, and Shane may use them too, of course, because they're all very interesting. And we took some shots of this, and there are clear toe marks, and you could see. I took a picture with my shoe, and I have a pretty big foot, and this thing was bigger than that. So what it was interesting is what it was. So, but the people have seen a Bigfoot in the vicinity of that house, and there is some talk of alien abduction as well. There's a woman who has wanted to talk to me, and we've been told that she attempted to talk to me in private, but she doesn't want her husband to know things that are going on. And it's rather complicated, and I've yet to talk to her because I was told by a friend of hers that she is trying to work up the courage to do so. Now, we're going to be back there as soon as possible. And our next step is to have Ben come with us and to do his thing. Now, as you may or may not know, Ben, I'm glad he's not here because he doesn't like me to talk about this, but he can communicate with a lot of things. He can communicate with trees. He seems to go into trances and is able to find things out. Although he and I are both very adamant he's not doing the medium thing, because that's not what it is. It's simply an awareness of the other worlds that are intersecting here. And anyway, so that's the next step as far as we're concerned is to go back. And we also the military always comes in to these flap areas. Okay. We always run into them. Now, the only place we didn't think we were going to run into them was in the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts, which is not far from where we live. And sure enough, Ben and I were over there after we returned from Rendlesham Forest in 2012, and we were kind of exploring an area where we weren't too familiar, and he had been communicating with some trees. And he mentioned, we haven't run into the military yet. Sure enough, we turn a corner, the road in the middle of nowhere, dirt road, Freetown State Forest. And there's this line of unmarked utility trucks and all these guys in sunglasses watching us go by. So I didn't even dare take a picture. So again, the military we feel is just as interested in these areas as we are, and perhaps have a handle on what is happening, and maybe attempting to weaponize the paranormal or the multiversal intersects, or because that way you could manipulate space and time, or at least appear to. So that's a deep well, and we run into it all the time in these flap areas. So in this Pennsylvania area, we have indeed, this is at the neighborhood meeting, people have pointed out that there is a site that we will be investigating on the next trip, that and as we expand our search and our mapping of the area. And they say this place has electric fence around it. There are other safeguards. That it's just an ordinary house, and that's very strange. And so it may or may not be anything, but we're going to check into that, and that may be our military connection, along with the low flights, including by fighter jets, things that aren't even legal. One of the men in the area said that the C-130s have come over and have dropped a residue over the area, and he saved some of it that later sort of evaporated. Now, I mean, everybody can't be crazy, and you always take these things with a lot of skepticism. But as I was telling Shane on the way back, when it happens to you, it's a little different. Now, people for years and years have been coming up to me after lectures or writing to the show saying they had this or that experience, particularly Bigfoot experiences, and they feel that these are a sophisticated, civilized population, that they felt privileged, and that they felt a great sense of peace in the presence of these things. Others have terrible odors and other things that aren't so pleasant. But it has now happened to me. If that's what it was that I saw, I felt privileged, and I felt completely at peace after having been shocked for just a second by this. I can't explain it, but now it's happened to me, and maybe I'll take what people say with a grain of salt instead of a pillar of salt next time I hear this.
Well, I can verify this to some degree about the military being interested in these window areas or these hotspots. I remember doing an interview with Joshua P. Warren who's of course a frequent guy. He has his own program on Saturday night, Speaking of Strange, and he's on a lot of the Ghost Hunter show on TV. And he's a pretty credible individual. And his main, I guess, involvement has been with the mysterious Brown Mountain lights in North Carolina. And there have been, of course, just pretty much what you've witnessed or been involved in Pennsylvania is pretty much duplicated even in the area around Brown Mountain. Of course, a lot of people there think that the lights are either um, ball lightning, but that's impossible because the duration of the sightings, usually ball lightning, I think is a pretty quick paced phenomena where the ball lightning will appear and either explode or disappear within a matter of probably 30 seconds or less. And these mysterious lights around Brown Mountain seem to be very intelligent. There's something behind them, some sort of intelligence. And of course, there are people there. There have been mysterious disappearances and abduction experiences, and people who claim that they've gone into the mountain and met some underground civilization. But also, the military has showed up there, and you know how they were actually found out is that one of Joshua's friends is in the catering business, and he was hired to deliver like 100 meals a day to this one, out of the way spot near Brown Mountain, where apparently the military had their own conclave or had set up their own base, and there's nothing else going on there outside of the Brown Mountain Lights. So, and we've heard this in other cases as well. There always seems to be a military involvement, and also too, you talk about the mysterious van. Well, this is very reminiscent of the Men in Black or the so-called UFO silencers that show up in a lot of cases, and kind of I don't know if you would say muddy the waters, but seem to get involved in this and try to keep a low profile, but yet there's something very strange. Some people claim sinister about it. I don't, it's kind of hard to judge exactly what their activities are. Now, did you have a feeling, and either one of you can answer this, that these lights that you saw, were they intelligently controlled? I mean, do you think that they were manned objects, or how would you describe them best?
Well, I don't know. Well, I thought that I have a theory that some of these orbs, and a lot of them look like orbs now, and there are a number of experts. I'm thinking of Ted Phillips in Missouri, who would probably has the greatest database.
Oh yeah, the Marley lights.
Yeah, the Marley Woods and all. He believes that there is a lot more of the large ball type UFOs, light balls as he calls them, more so than craft with legs, nuts and bolts as there used to be, or at least seems to have been. And he believes that this is a trend, and that's, I mean, in my relatively recent experience getting involved in UFOs now, well, not that recent, but a lot more recent than the ghost thing. That's what I've noticed too. Now Shane may have another opinion, but I tend to think these are in many cases living things that feed around the brains, BRENES, or membranes, as physicists would call them, of these parallel worlds. That's one theory, because they always seem to turn up in these areas, and they do seem to be intelligent. Other times that they give indications of being something else. Shane, I don't know what your opinion is on that, but
yeah, I mean, but I want to make clear too that there's so many of these orbs that show up on photographs or even on video that have infrared and that what wasn't seen by the naked eye. So I want to say that those there's so many things that dust, moisture, all kinds of things that these signals, the infrared signal will bounce off of, or your flash will bounce off of, and it makes it look like brilliant orbs. Make it look like they're intelligent, floating through the air. But I've duplicated this many times. Just take a throw pillow in your room, in your living room, and bang it, and then turn on your camera, and you'll get these effects. So it's really hard. But the ones that we see with our eyes now, those are a completely different thing. And I absolutely do believe that they are life forms, and I believe they operate through frequency. And I mean, no doubt. I mean, we've seen them a bunch of times in all these hot spots. Different colors, different sizes, but definitely brilliant, and just you just never get used to seeing them.
Well, if I may point out one thing regarding the military, in the interest of getting it right, North Carolina in the mountains there in the Appalachian Mountains in that part of the country are a pretty well known. It's not publicized, but it's a training area for NATO troops, because very often reports will come out. Oh, well, we saw German soldiers, or British soldiers, or French soldiers, or Polish soldiers. Yeah, you will from time to time, because that's a training area for NATO forces. Now, maybe that's not the whole explanation. And NATO certainly is not training, as far as we know, in southeastern Massachusetts, western Pennsylvania, or central Connecticut. So I just wanted to point that out, that there have been reports, and that the probable explanation is that it's NATO training area.
Well, it makes you wonder whether or not the military or what have you, whether or not they have access to like some kind of electronics that they can actually hone in on this kind of phenomena, at least to a certain extent, because like you said, they always seem to show up eventually,
including Rendlesham Forest.
Yeah, and in these hotspots, either that or they're just really, really good, as we know, on listening in on everybody else's conversations. Like, they have key words.
well, when you have public changes in behavior, which has happened in the Litchfield County, Connecticut area, at least statistically, from police reports and from reports of the people whom we have watching the area. This has not turned up, as far as we know so far, in the Pennsylvania case, but it might, because we're only just starting that. In that Litchfield case, you had people driving in ridiculous numbers on the wrong side of the road. When it was noticed in the media and in social media, the behavior changed, and people started driving off the road and into trees in numbers way beyond the statistical probability. It's difficult to gather data on this, but the police reports don't lie. Then you had people, when that was noticed, that stopped, and ridiculous numbers of suicides began. This is really sinister, dark stuff. So whether there is some correlation between the weird stuff that's sitting on top of Mohawk Mountain, or whether there is some sort of deliberate attempt to modify behavior, I don't know. We're so concerned about it. We brought in a behavioral scientist from New York City, who's an old friend of mine, that's kind of helping us look at that in this situation. And a real skeptic, and we're just trying to take this from the with our feet on the ground. So that is yet to turn up in the Pennsylvania case, but probably will.
One thing that we found too.
No. Go ahead, please.
All right, yeah. One thing we noticed too with a lot of these flap areas are there's water bodies nearby, particularly rivers and streams that seem to surround these areas, and a lot of them have and I find this almost every time. They go towards the area that we're investigating, and they turn away from, and what happens then? There's a compression there, and I believe that it's doing something with frequency. It's doing something with electromagnetic. Now, high electromagnetic fields can cause people to become suicidal and become violent and change their behavior. Right. And so we're finding this to be true. And now what it's doing, I think it also plays with the multiverse. I think it also allows things to bleed over from one parallel to the other through frequency, and the water is the enabling factor there. That's like a medium in a way, and almost all the credible flap areas that we see, we have rivers and streams that surround the area, and it's something I can't ignore. I've been noticing this for 20-something years. I mean, it's been an ongoing trend.
And water's one of the best
conductors. Yeah, I remember too in the years ago, where people were noticing that a lot of these window areas were located near high tension lines. Any high tension lines in that area there?
Oh yeah, they all have high tension lines. It's just again, the Pennsylvania area. One of the things, Tim, and not this will maybe lead us transition into something else, but there are, and we notice with this any kind of Bigfoot population, if it's an ordinary terrestrial creature that's just really hard to find, you'd have larger woodland areas. These are small, maybe just 8-10 acres each, maybe a little more, of woods. Then there are fields, cultivated fields, farms, hills. Where would this population live unless they come and go across world boundaries, which is what the natives will tell you they do. So there's all these factors are present. Now, on our last trip, Shane and I tracked down a large antenna, and there's one in the Litchfield case too that is we found out for sure is owned by the U.S. Army. And this blockhouse with no windows, right across from a very strange farm where there's no farming. We call it the funny farm. And in the Pennsylvania area, you've got it's a legitimate FM station's antenna from a nearby town. Excuse me, but it has a lot of funny doodads on it. And my military experience is, 30, 35 years old, maybe more. But still, I mean, we have people we talk to and experts we consult on these things. And there are some people, I took a lot of photos and a video of it. And some people don't know what some of the things are. And the same thing is present in the Litchfield case. So again, these are all unanswered questions. And with Pennsylvania, we're just getting started.
Now, have you investigated the Bridgewater Triangle?
Yes.
That's probably the oldest one, or the one that most people, I would guess, would be aware of. How far? Well, there have been all kinds of, I guess, things that have happened in that area outside of UFO sightings and all mysterious disappearances and so forth. How long has that been going on? I mean, that goes back into the history of New England.
Oh, absolutely. And the natives will tell you strange things were going on. And that's the area I was talking about when we saw this line of trucks with the guys looking at us with the sunglasses. That's the Bridgewater Triangle. Mm-hmm. And we live practically right next to it. I mean, it's maybe 15 miles away from here. So, we have easy access. It's a 220 square mile, and we're talking about the Hockomock wildlife management area, and there you have this area like within sight of Boston, practically 220 square miles of wilderness, and Freetown State Forest, a couple of towns where people will tell you a lot of strange things happen, and your classic flap area. But it goes back. The natives will tell you as far as they can remember. There are reports of funny things as soon as the Europeans got here. In the 1835, giant snakes started, and I'm talking about real giant ones. There's in 1970, I believe it was 73, a police officer was sitting in his cruiser in the area, and he believed he could see a Bigfoot, picked it up, not the whole cruiser, but the rear, and dropped it with the poor guy inside. And thunderbirds. There's even a hill called Bird Hill, where these things have been seen. And you always talk to two groups: hunters, because they see everything in the woods, and the natives, if there are any. Now, fortunately, there are some Wampanoags in this area, but they have a meeting place in there, but they don't like to go there. They go there once a year for a tribal meeting, and then they get out of there as quickly as they can. And there are Pukwudgies, supposedly, which we just found out from a contact of ours in the Hudson Valley, and on the other side of the area here, that the Pukwudgie is a word that the Algonquian speaking peoples used, and it's the same thing. It's the little people. So, because we did a show on the ethnic implications of paranormal experiences. Why do the Irish see banshees? And leprechauns? Why do certain other people see this, or the Arabs see the jinn? This kind of thing. So there do seem to be a number of similar sorts of creatures or phenomena or entities, but they have different names. And even the natives have leprechauns in a sense. So this is all going on in this Bridgewater Triangle area, and it's an ongoing case for us.
And you say there have been these deployment of military vehicles and in the area.
Well, there are a lot of black helicopters and the overflights and this sort of thing. But of course, there are a couple. There's air base on Cape Cod. At least the Coast Guard still has one. But I mean, these craft are unmarked black helicopters, which isn't even legal, and they're all over these flap areas. Again, what we saw on that road, whether it was the military, who knows? That's the nature of these things. There's a bit of evidence here. There's a bit of evidence there. You can't connect the dots, and the point gets lost. So I mean,
Right.
this is what happens with these, and it takes. We've been investigating the Litchfield, Connecticut area case for 11 years. Ben and I have. Shane came in a few years ago and is helping on that and doing some great work. And Shane always thinks of things we don't think of. So we'd have him by our side anytime, and it's just been it's just the more you look, the more you find, and it's overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, we've had a rash of mysterious skyquakes or booms.
Yes.
I guess in various parts of the country. Have any of them been reported in these areas?
Not so far. Although in the Litchfield area, there are people who say they've heard strange noises, but not necessarily coming from the sky.
Mm-hmm.
We've kind of looked at this as well. This subject, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, for example, is a really not Rosemary. I'm talking about the Linda Moulton Howe has done a particular study of these sounds, and people hear them. They come from indefinite areas or from the sky. I know I grew up in Connecticut where you had the moodest noises. You'd actually hear these rumblings in the ground. And of course, the university thereof found it to be seismic, and they're probably correct because this whole part of New England is honeycombed with all these little faults that occasionally will shake. And the trouble with the East Coast is that in the West Coast you could have a quake and it won't affect an area outside of a certain radius, but now they do. So there are all kinds of factors here.
Well, we are going away for our last break, and then we'll be back with the concluding segment of Exploring the Bizarre.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to the final segment, whatever, of Exploring the Bizarre. And I tell you, Tim, the time has really gone very,
this
fast.
This has really been I would call it a conceptual evening.
It really has.
Because we've centered. Usually, we come on and we ask the guests, questions, a little bit of their background and the cases. But we've actually centered on something here, and I think we've gotten a lot of valuable information, that you wouldn't probably get if you were kind of like doing the shotgun approach to this. And this case in Pennsylvania, I mean, at least to me, is very fascinating. I mean, when we wanted to do this show, I was thinking about, I said, well, it's like firsthand information, and it's believable. And of course, Paul, I mean, I consider to be a very credible, individual. And so, if Paul tells me something happened, I don't doubt it for 1 second. I mean,
I got this bridge for sale in New York, Tim. If you're...
Huh? Well, I own it already.
I see. You're the one I bought it from.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
but Swampland in Florida.
But that's true, because you hear these incidences and stories and things, and geez, you wonder, like, but when you add them up and you see that there's such a comparing one to the other, it's just so many similarities, and most of these individuals, I mean, we talk to them on the air, but they don't know each other, and yet they report pretty much the same sort of phenomena, happening in various spots around the country, if not the world. But now, Shane, let's go back a little bit in time. When you get involved in a case or an incident, what kind of draws? I mean, there must be some incidents that you just have like no interest in. I mean, what kind of draws you to something, or how do you get that gut feeling that something is worth spending time and effort on?
Well, most of the cases that I do are people that are reaching out for my help, so they come to me, and that's just through word of mouth and reputation and stuff like that, and knowing that I've been able to help people. And some are just people that have tried everything else and nothing worked, and then they happen upon me. They may not have heard of me, but that's how I get most of my cases. I don't particularly seek out cases, because then what you find yourself doing is you find yourself, investigating a haunted restaurant or a haunted cemetery or a haunted, So I don't typically do that because I'm busy with everything else with the people that are reaching out towards me, or us in some of these cases, that Paul and I are working on together. So,
Well,
um,
what have been some of the other cases that you've worked on that you feel are credible or has something that we could learn from?
all right. Well, there was one that was somewhat recent, and I've done like thousands, and over the years, I was doing five at a week at one point. But there was one. It was interesting. There's where the town I live in. There's a pizza joint, and had some cards in there, and these new residents, they had just bought a house, and they got my card, and they contacted me, and now they fled their home in Massachusetts. I live in New Hampshire, and they fled this home because it was out of control and it wasn't getting better. They had sought the help from one TV group who sent one of their family members, associate member groups down. That nothing happened. Then they called in another TV guy who brought in his group, and it got worse. And then they called in a demonologist and his team, and they said that worked. It seemed to get better for about 7 weeks, but then and when they told me that, I said, but then when it came back worse than ever. And they said, absolutely. I mean, this thing grabbed their kid, who was like, I think 4 or 5 at the time, grabbed him by his ankles and ripped him out of bed right to the foot of his bed. He had handprints on his ankles when they got there. Um, but they had all kinds of stuff going on. Now what these investigators did was, they all went in there with the same type of attack plan. Was to, let's attack this demon. Let's, it's a demon, and then let's get it out of here. And they did the Bible, and they did the oil on the doors, which I saw with my black light. I saw the crosses that they put on all the doors, and they used that, that tactic and stuff like that. But the family wasn't really
Mhm.
religious at all. Now what happened when they moved into this, it was a trailer park essentially, and now multiple, which we find this often. A lot of these homes were experiencing phenomena, but what happened was the gentleman of the house, um, he was obsessed with the paranormal to begin with. He was very interested in it. So when he started seeing like these creatures crawling up trees, and he would see Native Americans running, through the tree lines and stuff like that. Um, he became obsessed. He started doing his own investigation, and then what happened was this parasite said, "Hey, oh, you want to pay attention to something? Hey, I'll play with you. If you're going to pay attention to me." And so he attracted a parasite into his home. So they did have other phenomena happening around the area, but he attracted a parasite because of his obsession and the attention that he was given the subject, and all hell broke loose. So they ended up leaving after all these famous groups went in there, and they reached out to me. So they missed a lot of things. They missed, and none of them reported. These groups reported a high electromagnetic field in the house, which I found his he had a hot air heating uh, system that was emitting a gigantic amount of EMF. And I asked him once I found that, I said, "Where's the area of the house that you feel the most freaked out? Like something's going to get you?" He said, "In the hallway." That's exactly where the this heater is located, and it was leaking. I mean, it was just emitting a very high electromagnetic field, which was freaking them out even more. So, um, but the difficulty is, normally when I treat a home, I treat the people, because it's the people that are being attacked, not the home. But in this case, we had this whole neighborhood that was having phenomena happen. But the parasite was originally connected to this home here. These people moved out, but I think this parasite was hopping around from house to house just to keep things active. So um, I had to go in there and get rid of this entity, and in a way, I used the Native American presence, because they're doing their thing in their place and time. But I kind of pulled them into it, and we were able to eliminate this. I had a kid who I interviewed a couple times. He wanted to go on one visit with me, one investigation. So I spent some time with him, because I learned I have to be careful with that, because most people aren't ready to deal with it. They think they are, but I thought he had a good head, so I brought him, and I told him, I said, I'm not going to do anything specific here, but we're just I'm going to let you, I'm going to teach you a little stuff, but I'm not going to do anything today. We walked into the bedroom. I said, okay, it's in that bathroom right now. I know it is. He goes, what? And I'm like, how do you know? I said, well, you do this long enough, you sense it. And this thing, come to find out, I didn't know at the time, like to hide out in this bathroom. And these things tend to run from me anyway. But it was hidden. It was hiding out in this bathroom off the master bedroom. And I told him, I said, stand over there. And I started heading towards the door. The door flew wide open, smashed against the wall. The curtains, I mean, the air from it made the curtains fly up and hit the ceiling. He felt the rush, and this thing took off on the other side of the house. So I told him, I said, that's enough for today because I don't want to put you in danger. So we left. I went back the next day at 3 o'clock in the morning because I didn't want to bring attention to the family that owned this house because they didn't want no one knowing that anything was being done. And I did some stuff. I also educated the family that owned the house. They had a hard time. They were trying to sell it or rent it for like many months, like 5 or 6 months, and it always fell through. They even had a blind lady get escorted through the house. Said she didn't want to live there because it felt too dark, and she was 100% blind. So, but 5 days after I cleared the house, um, they had a bunch of people that wanted to rent it and a bunch of people that wanted to buy it, and they ended up renting it to somebody. And the guy lived there problem free. The other neighbors are still having issues, because I haven't gone there. But so that was kind of a unique case because you had these other people going there with the traditional techniques that don't work, and I went in there and I kind of just manipulated the mechanics, and I was able to break the connection without treating the family that lived there like I normally do. So it was that was a unique kind of case.
Now, you had mentioned earlier in the program that you were a shaman. What exactly does that mean, being a shaman?
Well, you're basically a healer. I'm part Native American, and it's not something that you just say, "Oh, I'm going to be one."
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have to be wired that way, and it's almost like you're meant to be type of thing. And so this was just kind of it came about, and the more I resisted, the more things happened to make me realize that my purpose is to help people. It is to heal and help people, and that's and once I just latched onto that and accepted it, everything's been awesome. It's been real smooth. But I even had an experience when I was 10 where I got really sick and the doctors didn't know what was wrong with me, and I had a visitation. They said, this is happening for a reason. We've been trying to reach you, but now this has to happen. And he used the word, you have to be tuned to this. You have to be brought here so you know how, so you're connected to it. So, and they pretty much showed me, what I saw. Now you could say hallucination, or whatever, because I wasn't able to eat or drink for like a month. I was very sick. Could have say I hallucinated, but what he showed me and what he told me, I've used, and it works every time, 100% of the time. And it's some of it is something that I don't hear anybody else talk about, and I don't think anybody really knows about these things. So it couldn't be coincidental. I was 10 and a half years old. I didn't make this stuff up on my own. So, even if it was a hallucination or a product of my own, consciousness, but it was, what I was shown and told has worked, and it has allowed me to help a lot of people. And I'm fortunate and I'm humbled by it,
Now, who were you shown by?
It was a relative of mine.
Uh-huh.
And so on my mother's side, my mother's Blackfoot, and she's not full. Neither, obviously I'm not either. My last name is French, but Blackfoot, Native American, and I wasn't raised this way. Matter of fact, my mother went to Catholic school as a child. She was pulled from her home, and she did an essay on how she was Blackfoot and Native American. The nun pulled her out in the hallway and said, "Don't you ever tell anybody that you're Native American." So my mother would, she didn't talk about it after that. So I wasn't raised that way. So, but sometimes you just, you're meant to do something, and my I think my purpose has always been healing and helping people. That's no matter what I do in life, I'm always looking to help people.
Mhm.
And
Now, Paul, your son Ben. I don't think I've ever asked you this, but how did he? I mean, how did he first find out that he had some psychic type of a gift?
Well, he came in to work with me when he was 13, and his mom and I discussed it very carefully before we let him do that. But he's been a natural. He is not afraid of anything. We began to notice this on the first few cases. Now the first case that he started, there were two cases in August of 2005 when he was 13 years old. One was this Litchfield, Connecticut case. We started right in the farmhouse of the woman who reported the case to us at first. And then there was the haunted policeman of Vermont, as we call it, right? And in both cases, he began to have these experiences in certain places. In Vermont, we got out of the car there, rural area of Vermont, and we were both drawn immediately. We hadn't even gone into the house yet. We were immediately drawn to a part of the backyard where there was a tree, and we both had the same impressions, and were drawn to that because it turned out, in our opinion, that something was happening there in the same space in a parallel reality. In this case, a fight that ended up in someone dying, whether to us the past, the future, who knows. But the parasite feeding on that would go into the house now and then where the police officer lived, and would feed there when it couldn't get enough to eat from what was going on in the yard in some parallel reality. Well, Ben picked right up on that. And I didn't expect this. I thought he'd be, I try to be kind of intellectual and feet on the ground and look at all the evidence and things. And he operates on an entirely different level. And in the first few cases, we began to find out about that. And then in the Litchfield case, in the flap areas, including Rendlesham Forest in England, he has had these trance-like states. Matter of fact, in Rendlesham, we didn't even get out of the parking lot. We were with Larry Warren, one of the original 1980 witnesses.
Yes.
A couple of other people. Yeah. And we didn't even get out of the parking lot. It was late at night. He collapsed. Dogs started howling up and down the road, including the dog that was with us. And by this time I knew, don't touch him, leave him alone. There were 3 or 4 other people with us. And he came out of it, and he had all these impressions of things that had happened, though he doesn't remember going into the trances. This is a pattern with him. And it is rather shamanic, in my opinion, because he did study with an Aztec shaman for a while, but Ben's very humble, and he just kind of lets it happen. He doesn't talk about anything having to do with it, and it is what it is with him. So it kind of started spontaneously, I guess, or he was born to it or whatever. He's very good at it, though.
Well, now you talk about Rendlesham Forest. I remember, I've spent some time with Peter. I was friends with his sister, who was a punk rock singer, and
Peter Robbins.
Peter Robbins. Yes.
Yeah.
And the first day, he always tells a story about the first day that he went over to England, to Rendlesham Forest, and Larry had all these weird, sightings. It was as if the whole scene was recreating itself. Did you fellows have something similar happen to you while you were there?
Well, yeah, you might say that. Matter of fact, we approached it as if it was going to be a flap area, and sure enough, we gave a talk in the village of Woodbridge. The place was standing room only, and everybody we went 2 hours over. Everybody had their stories of things that had happened to them locally. Now, nobody ever asked the local people, really. And they were still having UFO sightings, strange lights. We got pictures that you wouldn't believe of, of strange figures, things of this kind.
No way.
Oh, yeah. No, people have they call them Yetis there.
Now, is this in any of your books?
It will be.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And speaking of books, now this is what, number 7? I
think I lost count. 7 or 8. I think it's 8. Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong. Yeah, it's.
And what was, I think the first book I read of yours was something Behind a Window.
Faces at the Window.
Faces at the Window. Okay,
yes,
right.
1998. Yeah.
All right, and there was another one with the Voices in the Attic.
Footsteps in the Attic.
Footsteps.
You got to get your body parts right, Tim. So, yeah, Footsteps in the Attic.
Hey, that's more than most hosts would remember.
I know. That's it. And then, this is the first book Ben and I have written together.
Ah.
Yeah, so it's based on radio scripts from the last few, as I said earlier.
Now, how did your writing style? I mean, how has it progressed? I mean, in the subject matter, would you say it's changed at all, or have your viewpoints on this changed? I mean, are they reflected in the work, in your written work?
Well, I think the books are different. As a sixth one, the Turning Home, God, Ghosts, and Human Destiny was essentially an approach to the history of the paranormal. There are a few case histories in there, as in the others, but there was a lot of people were they didn't like the fact that it was cerebral and not full of these things. But the writing style, I'm a journalist.
That's right. Yes, you started as a journalist.
Yeah, well, that's the only thing I could do when I got thrown out of the seminary. So I wrote very journalistically in the first book in '98, and people said that's why it was so scary, because it was so matter of fact. Mm-hmm. And but I think that it's become I still write the same way. But in this latest book, there are like 50 different cases that I was either involved with, or Ben and I have been involved with, or that we have researched on site, such as disappearing buildings, things of this kind. And that's essentially...
What was about buildings?
Well, we have an entire chapter on strange and mysterious places.
Yes.
Such as the Phantom House in Vermont. Was there one day, gone the next.
The house was gone?
Well, surveyors reported this to me in 75. They saw it one day. There was this weird guy. There were no wires running to it. And then they came back to finish the surveying, and the house had disappeared. Turned out, evidently, it burned down in 1910. We had a living ghost town in Utah. People drove into it, and everything was in Dutch. And the people were dressed strangely, and the vehicles were all odd, and nobody spoke English. And then it's a well-known ghost town. Phantom Islands, particularly in the Caribbean. Dyatlov Pass, a very famous case in Russia in the late 50s. What that may have been, and the ins and outs of inns, as we call the section, which is about an inn that 4 people reported staying at, and then was not hadn't existed for a century. This sort of thing. And then we go into possession and exorcism, paranormal lives of the saints, animals and the paranormal, and finally, what is heaven? And there are chapters on this case in Connecticut, the Village of Voices, and also the Bridgeport poltergeist case. Chapter on suicide, and then this chapter on evil, possession.
I would say, if it has to do with the paranormal, you've been involved in around it and know about it probably more than anybody else. So now, are you any conferences coming up in your area?
Yeah, actually, we just finished a whole pile of stuff this year for MUFON and other things we were speaking at. Shane and I will both be April 29th at the New England Parafest in Kittery, Maine. That's always a lot of fun. And with the book coming out 2 months early, we're scrambling. There are all kinds of signings and stuff that are going to be taking place.
Wonderful.
And it's been suggested that I speak at some of the major conferences next year, but I'll believe that when I see it, because we're not good for business. So.
Well, now, Shane, what's on your docket?
Well, this Sunday I'll be on Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Benino.
Yeah, think of that. He's on all our open line shows.
Yeah, and then then we have the Parafest that he discussed, and then I just have a bunch of lectures booked in 2017, but I'm still getting requests for other radio shows, which I won't mention on your show, but.
Well, I think we're going to have you fellows back on in a few months. We want to continue with the investigation of what's going on in Pennsylvania and in some of these other areas. And Tim, we got some really good shows lined up here for the next couple of weeks. And I think we outdid ourselves this evening. And I want to thank Paul and Shane for being on. And Tim, what are you up to this week?
Well, right now, Tim, I am working on a book on the wonderful artwork of our friend Carol
That,
Rodriguez.
that's correct, right? We should have that out probably around just before Thanksgiving. Would you say?
I would hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. She's been a wonderful. Of course, I've known Carol now for many, many years. She's been an assistant to me, and of course, a friend as well. And she has the most beautiful use of colors in her artwork, and very exceptional. Anyway, I hear that the music in the distance, and so we have to call it a night and lock the door and put out the cat and sing again. Thank you for being with you. We had a very educational evening, and I think a very perplexing and perhaps a little bit frightening one. Good night, Tim.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.